Welcome to On Scene with the Huffmans. I'm Mason Matthews.
I'm Joey Huffman.
And we've got a pretty special guest with us here today. Today we have got the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of San Angelo, Mr. Jerry Huffman. And I can't help, so I said with the Huffmans, Jerry, your last name's pretty familiar.
Before.
I know a guy, I think he works for the fire department, Joey Huffman, I believe.
Yeah, he's
Any
been around a
relation
little
there? Or?
Well, he is my oldest son.
Oldest son.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I'm sorry. I know the guy pretty well. No, that's pretty awesome. I think it's pretty cool to have two Huffmans serve in the city. It's awesome to have both of you here today. So it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
This is a pretty special thing for us that we're going to get to have son interviewing dad. So I think we're pretty excited. Well, Jerry, I know you really well, but let's introduce you to the city. Tell me a little bit. I know you started back 1st of August as the Emergency Management Coordinator for the city. Tell me a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about your background and your career and how you got to San Angelo.
Well, before I worked for the City of San Angelo, I was a state employee with the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and I was a district coordinator for the Concho Valley. So the 13 counties of the Concho Valley were my area of responsibility. And of course, during that time, I was there about 14 years. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I had the opportunity to serve Texas all over the state. Every hurricane in the last 14 years I've been deployed to and worked in some area, local government, state government, in some form or fashion. Prior to that, I was with the City of Sweetwater as their fire chief and emergency management coordinator there for the Nolan County as well as City of Sweetwater.
Awesome. So I would say that your career path has absolutely prepared you for the role that you are in.
I would say it fits him perfectly, absolutely.
You know, and I know I will tell you this. So I've been a fireman almost January will be 14 years. I've been with San Angelo Fire Department. I've worked in a lot of other smaller places in the Concho Valley, and I hear your name all the time. As a matter of fact, I never, for a long time, I didn't even put together the Joey Huffman and Jerry Huffman, and I just heard this Jerry Huffman name all the time. And I can tell you that to say that you are well respected in the state is a vast understatement.
Yes,
you are an extremely qualified person, and I know it's easy to talk about somebody when and I know I kind of putting you on the spot here, but you are. San Angelo is very lucky to have you. You are extremely qualified. And I know the emergency management, the Office of Emergency Management is only going to improve with you in it. And so citizens in San Angelo should feel very fortunate that we have a quality individual like yourself.
Thank you.
And your son, I guess. He's okay too.
I assure you the name Jerry Huffman's a shadow I'm happy to live in, absolutely.
We are certainly glad you're here and very fortunate to have you. So tell me a little bit, Jerry, about the Office of Emergency Management. I think the name in itself is probably a little self-explanatory, but I don't know that everyone really knows what that office is tasked with. So tell us a little bit about it and what those roles and responsibilities are.
Well, the emergency management function is a coordinating function. It's not a command function. And the average citizen probably doesn't know much about it because, thank goodness, you don't see it all the time.
Right.
It's always working, it's always in the background, but it's not always up front. It's not going to be front page news. But the Office of Emergency Management's job is to coordinate the various functions of a governmental entity like the city or county during the times of disaster. You know, firefighters know what firefighters do. Police officers know what police officers do. Public Works, the guys that do the water distribution, they know their job.
Right.
And most of us, I'll use the term silo for lack of a better term. We work within our silo and we do our thing every day. And then once in a while, something bad happens, something that's beyond their ability for one department, like just the fire department, to handle it.
Right.
We may need help and assistance from the law enforcement or from Public Works or Public Health. COVID is a good example of everybody working together to try to meet those needs. So as emergency manager, I'm in charge of nothing, but my responsibility is to coordinate to make sure that if there's a need in one department that another department might be able to fix, we try to get those two people together, liaison, if you will, so that they're getting to talk and say, can we really do this? And obviously the step above that would be whenever San Angelo and Tom Green County cannot meet a need, then we step it up to the state or even our surrounding counties and see what can they do to help us.
Right, so I mean, you're connecting all the dots. I mean, so like you said, when there's a fire, obviously the fire department takes care of that. When there's some type of law enforcement type, they take care of that. But when there is something that it's going to involve all of those entities, you're the one kind of connecting all the pieces and I guess providing or making it look like one cohesive effort. I guess that's huge.
That's what
huge.
we're trying to do.
Right. Yes. That's awesome. Well, tell me, obviously, we talk about an emergency management, obviously, and we're talking about some type of a disaster or an emergency. What happens when there is not an emergency? So obviously we know what you do when the emergency happens itself. What happens in the meantime? What happens, as far as preparedness or training, or what are you doing up until, you go into action, so to say?
It's a good question, and most people, again, would not understand what all is going on in the background because, if we have a disaster 1 week in a year, they want, what do you do the other 50-something weeks,
Right.
But there's 4 phases of emergency management, and the first one being mitigation. Just what can you do to make a disaster have less effect on you? So building codes. Right. Our building inspectors are part of mitigation. Right. The building plans, the fire inspectors, that's all part of the mitigation. What can we do to lessen the impact of a disaster? And then we move to the next phase, which is preparedness. Now in preparedness, there's the planning, the training, all those things that you just mentioned. That's what's going on whenever there's not a disaster. So you have to be prepared for those things. And some of these things, some of the training is required by the federal government to be able to get grants and other things. They want to make sure that their money's going someplace where it's going to be used, right, and not just money going. And so we do a lot of training to help meet those criteria that would line us up for grants with the Council of Governments or with the federal or the state agencies. The next phase is response, which y'all are very well versed in.
Yes, sir.
When the whistle blows and it's time to go do what you do, y'all know what to do. I've tried to make it a mantra of mine that I never tell a firefighter or police officer how to do their job. I just try to tell them where we want them to do it. So, if you need an area secured, you don't have to tell a police officer how to secure it. Just tell them, go secure this area, right, and it'll be done. So same thing with water, public health, any of these things. So that's the response phase. And then the next phase is the recovery phase, which is the longest phase of any of these parts of the disaster, because the recovery from disasters can take years. When I first went to work for the state, they were still doing Tropical Storm Allison, mm-hmm, which wasn't even a hurricane, just tropical storm. Took 20 years to finally close out Allison. Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Ike and some of these others that we've had, Katrina, it really will be an entire career for somebody to close those things out, because the bridges you rebuild, the roads you rebuild, all the fire stations you build, all those things have to have a lifespan to where they're built, they're paid for, and you move on to the next phase. Right. And so recovery is always something that you need to always be thinking about. So when you leave recovery, where are you at? You're right back to mitigation. What went wrong in the last one that we can fix in the next one? Because there's no such thing as a perfect disaster. Right. I'll give you one example of a definition that I use. An emergency is something that's urgent, but you have everything you need to fix it. For example, if there was a fire in this room, there's a fire extinguisher, we've got everything we need. Every day, San Angelo has emergencies, every day. It's either a police emergency or fire emergency, and we have what we need. We've got a fire department, a police department to go take care of that. That's routine business, if you will, except for the family that was involved. Right. But then when a disaster happens, you have something urgent, but you don't have everything you need to fix it. Now, where are we going to get that stuff? Yep. Maybe it's a neighboring department, maybe it's a neighboring county, maybe it's the state, it might even be the federal government. But those are what you look at when you have a disaster, is that we have something happen and we don't have what it takes to fix it.
Right. That's a great definition.
And when you talk about that, I mean, a while ago I said something, about hearing your name circulated all throughout the state, and generally most of the times I did hear your name, it was with, the hurricanes and weather involving Texas. I go to conferences all over the state sometimes for some of the things I'm involved in, and I'm with these firefighters from all over. Oh, Jerry Huffman. I know Jerry Huffman. So clearly you have worked on a very big stage and coordinated large emergencies that involve multiple aspects, state government, federal government for that matter. And now we've got you right here in town, and I can't say that enough. I know I've already mentioned that, but I can tell you, we talk about resting easy and feeling like you're in good hands. I mean, clearly your experience, now that we have that on a local level, I mean, we are set up and prepared for any type of emergency. And I know I'm not just sugarcoating that. I mean, I truly believe that. I think that's important for everyone to know.
Well, thank
so.
you.
I know some of the events that he's worked on are huge national level events. Got lots of media attention for weeks upon weeks on some of the events, the things that he's dealt with. So yeah, we're lucky to have him.
Yeah. So anything that we might have go down here in little old San Angelo, I would say that we're in good hands. We're in good hands. So tell me a little bit about. So probably when we're talking about an emergency, I know they're saying hurricanes and things like that. We're not going to have a hurricane in San Angelo. So let's talk a little bit about an emergency. I think probably what's on the most recent and on everybody's minds is when we had the freeze not long ago. Clearly that was an emergency for our area. It was for lots of parts of Texas, but definitely here in San Angelo. So give me maybe some examples, if you will, is if that were to happen. Obviously we had road issues, we had energy issues and power outage issues and access to water and access to food issues. Tell me a little bit about what would that look like if we were to have hopefully we don't, but if we were to have another situation like that, another freeze like that, what are your first courses of action? Obviously, we're doing what fire department's doing what it does, and law enforcement does what it does, but there's a lot of setup there too, because there's, like you said, there's mitigation, and then there's going to be a recovery phase too. So, what would it, just since that's fresh on everyone's minds, what would that look like?
Well, Winter Storm Uri was a worst case scenario in my opinion, because it affected so many of our partners that would come to our aid. It's one thing for a tornado, even a large tornado, to go downtown San Angelo, God forbid, but it's happened before, it will happen again probably. But we're the only ones affected probably, so our neighbors can come help, the state can come help, and you can drive down the road. Uri, if I was to try to write Winter Storm Uri up as a scenario and a exercise, I would have every firefighter and police officer saying that's ridiculous. It could never be that bad. It could never, you're trying to build us up to fail.
Right.
That was the reality of it.
And we all know if you say that'll never happen, that's the next call coming. Yeah, we all know that. So
when so many of our help could not get here because the roads were impassable. Well, remember, a disaster is when you don't have what you need to take care of it. And now what you need to take care of it is having trouble getting here.
Right.
So whether it be loads of water, replacement parts and pieces for the water system, then the grid goes down. Right. I mean, who would have thought? But yet it did. And so I've had a couple of meetings with department heads in the city looking at what worked, what did not work, what can we do to try to do it better. But I would assure you, if half of Texas is having a disaster like that, people are going to have problems in San Angelo because there's just no fixing it. Right. You just can't go out and buy a bottle of electricity and plug it in.
Well, and I will say, I think you're, I would say that most of the time there are not regular emergencies where you're going to be actively busy, but which is good. But when it does, you talked about your preparedness, being prepared, and having the things that you need for if and when it happens. There's a lot of ifs there. I mean, who would ever think Texas is going to freeze over? There's a lot of different types of emergencies that are probably going to call on lots of different types of help. So I would imagine, when somebody says, well, we're not having an emergency, there was no freeze this year, we didn't have an emergency, what's he doing? It's for when it does happen, because man, at that point, if you're not prepared, it's too late. I would think. Some
of the problems is COVID, and we're in a post-COVID world, so what does that look like? If you're trying to shelter people, in the days before COVID, we would open up the Coliseum or the Civic Center, put hundreds of people in there together. As a COVID world, that's not a smart thing to do. Right. So we do non-congregate sheltering in hotels and motels. Well, that's expensive.
Yes, sir.
Necessary, but expensive. And so then when you have the winter storm, where the hotels don't have power or water.
Yep. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? When you had a plan put together. It's the same plan that everybody else in Texas is using, non-congregate sheltering. And then you can't use it because the power or the water's down. those are things that, no matter what you do, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot because there's just no fixing it
Right.
quickly. Nobody, so all we can do is save lives.
Yes, sir.
Our first choice is always save lives. So if we have to put them together in a shelter situation that's not the best for all, then we do the best we can. If we can get them power, if we can get them something to save their property, that's great. The city did a lot of work trying to help individual citizens keep their homes from freezing and busting, and trying to repair them when that was done, just to try to save property.
Right.
And try to, because there's no place really to put them anyway.
Right. Nowhere to go.
So, when you're talking about putting generators on buildings, when you're talking about water supplies, I don't think the average taxpayer really wants us to have it that good. This is a question that has often come up, is that, do you know why there's not a fire hydrant on every corner?
It's expensive.
Money.
It's too expensive. So why is there not 50 shelters ready to go? Why is there not, we can't afford the taxes on that.
Right.
So the idea would be is that we plan for the worst and we hope for the best. And somewhere in between there, we depend on our neighbors and the state and the feds to come and help.
Yep.
That help is not always going to be the same day.
Right.
Most of the guidelines will tell you that the average citizen, you in your home, Joey in his home, should prepare to do whatever they have to do for 72 hours on their own.
Right.
On their own. So
Wow.
Advice.
Yep.
that works great in August. It's not so good in December.
No, it's not. No, sir. Well, tell me, you've, like I said, you've been, firefighter in Sweetwater, or fire chief in Sweetwater, and then working for the state for a long time. So you've seen lots of things in your career. You've been involved with lots of things, and now you're here. You've been here about 3 months. What are you? Is there any plans or changes that you have? Coming into a new place and knowing what you know and doing what you've done and looking at what we have in place here. Is there any plans that you have to change anything or introduce anything new? Or
No, I don't think there's any drastic actions that need to be taken. We have an emergency operations plan. We have everybody on board with the plan. I think that we learned from every one of them, and we learned a lot of things from Uri, I'm sure.
Right.
Right now, we're in the recovery phase of Uri, trying to gather up all the cost involved to every department and every agency, and trying to get that into the state and up to the feds to try to get some reimbursement for all of those costs. So we're still working it. Okay. But as far as any changes and plans and so forth, we will try to incorporate what we've learned in Uri into the next phase. But I'm not sure that the probability, there's two things, there's the possibility and the probability. And it is possible that it could happen again. But the probability is that there'll be something else happen that'll be just as devastating.
Something different, totally different type of issue.
I worked the explosion at West after that explosion. Right. And nobody was prepared for that. Yep. And what do? It's not like a storm, it's not like an act of nature, but yet there was $100 million worth of damage. So something like that in San Angelo, we have trains come through here, 18-wheelers. There's a lot of things that go on every day that, thank goodness for safety measures and safety codes that help us stay ahead of the game. Right. But it is something that we think we have it. We think we have a plan for what's reasonable. Right. But you can only go so far down that road before you have to say, what if, what if, what if?
Yes, sir.
Sooner, if the zombies come out, we're sunk.
Awesome. Well, tell me, what if somebody, Jerry, what if somebody wanted to ask you a question? What if there's somebody, I just want, I want to pick his brain, or there's just something that, I've gone here and I don't get the right answer. I've gone here and I don't get the right answer. Is there a way somebody can get in touch with you? Is there a way somebody, if they do have a question or they're just not sure about something, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, probably the best way for me would be an email. Okay. So it's jerry.huffman@cosatx.us.
And I'm sure that Mr. Groves can probably put that on the screen there, so you'll probably see that.
I would welcome any, and I will try to respond to all of them if I can.
Perfect. Well, Jerry, I want to thank you for coming on the show today, and I want to really thank you for accepting the position you did. And like I say, I'll say it again. I think San Angelo is really lucky to have you here. We do have two Huffmans now, one really, really good one in Joey. And, but I tell you what, I know that, I hope you're excited to be here. I know we're excited to have you. I know the city of San Angelo is very lucky to have you.
Not many people know, but after my dad retired in Sweetwater, I've been a fireman there for over 30 years, chief for 8 or 9, I believe.
Almost 20.
Chief almost 20, gosh almighty as well. Whenever he retired, they named the street beside the fire station after him, Jerry Huffman Boulevard.
Okay.
And I always said that if they'd known him better, they'd name the whole town after him. So I don't see anybody changing any street names for me, so I think he's got it.
Well, I mean, and you know, growing up with Joey, I'm sure your knack for disaster management.
Oh yeah, that's where it started.
You're welcome.
I mean, what better training is there to have it? You know,
You're welcome.
Have a walking disaster at your house. I mean, I'm just telling you.
Joey, get off the roof.
No kidding. I was very excited about today's show. Obviously, I love both these guys, and like I said, the city's very, very lucky to have both of them. So, well, Jerry, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Mason.
And again, for On Scene, I'm Mason Matthews,
I'm Joey Huffman.
and we'll see you next time.
Next time.